Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of Mouthwash, a minty fresh take on politics. And welcome. We are here. I am here live at the Chateau de Marseille studio. And, this show is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be just some old dude talking. I actually have some younger people that are brave enough to come on this show. I actually have a millennial and a Gen Z. Unbelievable. And this show is not going to be an echo chamber. This isn't just a right or a left. We actually have a member from each side. And I'm going to get right to it here. I'm going to introduce our first co-host, and that's Ashton, and she would be representing the left. Ashton,
Hello.
welcome, and tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
All right, so we'll start out with something easy, just a fun fact real quick. I am terrified of donkeys, which makes being liberal pretty interesting, considering the donkey is our mascot. So I, scare myself sometimes. No, but then I am actually in charge of a nonprofit that works with the racial equity movement. And I grew up conservative and became liberal when I was in high school. I started leaning that way. And then when I went to college and started educating myself about outside viewpoints and policy, I definitely switched over to being pretty left. So I'm so excited to be here and have these discussions and really get some interesting viewpoints.
All right, and that is our representation on the left. And now we have our representation on the right. Jacob, go ahead and come on camera and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you folks for joining us today. My name is Jacob. Kind of a fun fact about me is I'm in show business. I'm a professional singer. Specifically, I do older music from the 50s and 60s, like Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, Dean Martin, Johnny Cash, all the oldies but goodies. Kind of an interesting spin on that is, being very conservative and right-wing as I am. Usually you'd expect somebody in showbiz to be more on the left. Certainly a lot of my colleagues in the music business are more left, but I'm actually a conservative singer, so.
Very good. So we have, and obviously you're a little bit younger than me, so I've been very interested in our preview to the show. And for full disclosure, folks, I sort of met these folks through recommendations and auditions and tryouts. And we've had a couple meetings to talk about the show and get ready for it. And I've enjoyed it so far, and we have not even gotten mad at each other yet. But hey, you never know. It's still early. The premise of the show is going to be basically our schedule will be we will talk about a local issue, local to Indiana or Indianapolis area. And then we will talk about a national level topic. And then we're going to talk about the conspiracy theory. I think you'll really enjoy that. We got something special coming up for you on that. I forgot to tell you about me. I'm the host. My name's John Schmidt. I know. It's just, I haven't had a show going for a minute, so I'm a little rusty.
Come on, John.
My name's John Schmitz. I've run for a couple of political offices. I live in Mars Hill, Indianapolis, which is down by the airport. It's sort of an underserved neighborhood. Me and my wife started an art center 2 or 3 years ago out here, and we enjoy living here. And a fun fact about me, in 1974, I was 13 on Friday the 13th. So if anything goes wrong, it's my fault. So without any further ado, we're going to get to our first topic. And also on the scroller down there below, we have a phone number you can leave a voicemail on, and you can leave questions, comments, or bad dad jokes. We don't care which one you leave. And if it is an interesting comment or a question, we'll put it on the air, and we'll try to do our best to answer it. So with that being said, we are streaming live on Facebook on the Mouthwash page. So go like that if you want to be notified for our next show Tuesday night at 8 p.m. We're going to try to get that done every Tuesday at 8 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time, because Jacob is in Central Time. He's up by You live what, a block, 2 blocks from the Illinois border up in Lake County?
Yep, two blocks from the Illinois border and 30 minutes from the Loop in downtown Chicago. So that's why a lot of times when I come down to Indianapolis, people are like, "You're from Indiana. The way you talk, you sound like you're from Illinois."
Yeah, you got a little bit of an accent. It's not like Carmel or Zionsville, that's for sure. So we are streaming live on my personal page, Do Something Indy, which is another show that I do that highlights positive things going on here in Indianapolis. And then at some point, if we can get some subscribers on YouTube, we will go live on YouTube, but we need 1,000 of those. And I think we have 3, me, Ashton, and Jacob, maybe subscribers on that. But it is, most of our stuff is Mouthwash Talk Show. So we are on YouTube, Rumble. Those will be where we archive our shows if you want to go back and watch one if you miss it. We are on Facebook. And Ashton's set up a TikTok for us. So Ashton, I'm going to let you tell us about TikTok because I didn't even have an account till today. Okay, so tell us about TikTok. And
what do you want me to tell them about TikTok?
What is our handle on there, or whatever you call it? And
it's at Mouthwash Talk Show.
Okay, and then can anybody make a TikTok on ours, or do we,
You can duet us on TikTok and make comments on our videos. You can message us and leave comments. So we can put little clips of what we do on here. And once we have enough followers, we can go live on there as well.
All right. Well, that's good. I'm looking at our comments right now, and we have a couple of everything. So everybody's sort of critiquing us to make sure everything looks right. So anyway, let's get to our first topic, because we do not want to dilly-dally, because we're going to be about 45 minutes to an hour tonight, and we do not want to go longer than that. So our first topic is going to be the homicide rate in Indianapolis, and what can be done and what is being done about it. And I'm just going to throw this out there and get it started, and we'll start with Jacob. What do you think about the Indianapolis homicide? You're not really from Indianapolis, but you're close to Chicago. Give us a take on that.
Well, I would say in regards to the Indianapolis homicide rate, I don't think it's solely just a local issue. And what I mean by that is certainly you have some unique circumstances in Indianapolis that cause the violence, but you see this throughout a lot of big cities throughout not just the Midwest, but really across the country. I mean, certainly you've got it in Chicago, you've got it in places like Detroit, and you've even got it in more mid-sized cities like Gary, Indiana, where I'm only 20 minutes away from. So this is kind of a problem that really seems to plague big cities, and generally blue cities are kind of the biggest, are usually the biggest culprits of this. And usually the immediate response on how to deal with this kind of violence is ultimately, oh, guns are bad, we got to get rid of the guns. So usually that means gun control policies, other sorts of infringements on our Second Amendment rights. First of all, I would say that this response is inadequate, but I would also say that it's unconstitutional. The Second Amendment was originally put in to ensure that citizens have protection against, not only against, a criminal or a thief or something like that, but against an oppressive government. So it's not just for hunting or fishing. The founders certainly had the Second Amendment with the American Revolution in mind. With that being said, having more guns out there, in my opinion, does not necessarily equate more violence. I always have kind of come from the philosophy that actually if you had more people with guns able to defend themselves, that would reduce the amount of violence, because you can use guns as a deterrent. Like a robber would be most likely a lot less likely to rob your house if you had a gun to deter them. Thus, I would say that random gang violence would de-escalate in Indianapolis and in other cities if more law-abiding citizens were given guns. Because bear in mind, a lot of these gangbangers and criminals, they don't get their guns legally anyway. They get them off the black market. So I don't think gun control is the answer. I think actually allowing legal gun owners to maintain their firearms is a good means of defense. I also think keeping people in, especially teenagers, in good quality educational systems, schools that are well kept up, because a lot of times inner city schools are a big issue. It's just creating a better social environment, keeping them in school, keeping them in church if they're religious, and allowing law-abiding citizens to defend themselves. That's kind of my perspective on it in a nutshell.
Okay, I got a feeling that Ashton may have a different perspective of that. What say you?
Well, Jacob, you did call me out a little bit because my solution, and I understand, I agree, it's not completely adequate. It's not the only thing that needs to be done, but I'd say it's a big thing that needs to be done, is gun control. And I, have heard that argument that it is our Second Amendment right. And I understand that the Constitution grants us certain freedoms. But I also understand that the founding fathers named them amendments for a reason. Slavery was in the Constitution, and that is obviously not okay or right. And so that has been taken out. We can amend things to make our nation better. And the point that you would use it to rise up against a tyrannical government was great when we were using muskets. When the Constitution was written. But now we have drones and tanks, and I just don't think that the normal gun owner is going to do much against the government. You actually look at a professor from Indiana University. She did a study on the homicide rate in Indianapolis. A lot of it comes from gun violence. It is mostly gun violence. And a lot of those are non-fatal. So we're not even accounting for that. There are a lot of non-fatal shootings that happen. That's just a lot of violence in general happening from guns. And when you look at the gun violence, when you look at states that have a better rating, John, would you mind putting up that image that I have?
Sure.
States that have a better rating have lower gun deaths per capita. So a lot of the gun violence in Chicago is actually from the lack of gun laws that Indiana has. A lot of people are able to go over to Indiana and buy guns. And the statement that they get them on the black market is just not true. People are going to states with lax gun laws and bringing them to states with stricter gun laws. When you look at a gun on the black market in Australia, where they have strict gun laws, it's $35,000. That's not something that is easily accessible for the average person. You can't just go out and buy a $35,000 gun. If you can, I'm not sure what crimes you're committing that you would need to commit, because you are obviously pretty good at saving your money. But the truth of the matter is, in nations that we see that implement this, we see a decrease in gun violence. We saw it in South Africa. We saw it in Austria. We saw it in Australia. All of these countries, when they implemented stricter gun laws, saw on average a 15% decline in gun deaths. So we do see that it's effective. We see in states, in the states in this country that implement stricter gun laws, that it is effective. And when you look here on this map, you see New York, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts. They have high ratings for their gun laws. They are all around each other, and they have the lowest deaths per capita in the entire country. So we see that this does work. And so implementing stricter gun laws in Indiana, which gets a D- rating because our gun laws are that terrible. You don't have to register a handgun, a rifle, anything. I saw the comment that said, give me a specific example of how Indiana gun laws are lax. We don't require background checks. We don't require a waiting period after you purchase a gun. We don't have require people to register guns, handguns, shotguns, anything. So those are all things that need to happen. We need to have background checks. We need to have mental health screenings. I understand that just completely taking away guns isn't going to happen, but I think we need some common sense gun laws, and we need them now to help reduce the homicide rate in Indianapolis.
Okay, wow. I'm checking out the chat right now, and there's some pretty good questions on here, but I want to go over the map real quick. Man, I'll tell you what, Alaska, man, they're shooting it up down there, and then Louisiana, Missouri, or Mississippi, and Alabama. It's a pretty tough place to go there. So I got. I'm going to put some of these questions up here. I have one here from Spiro. I'm going to put it up on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and take this off, and He asked, why does the homicide topic pivot to guns? I mean, I guess you could kill somebody with a rock or stat or whatever, but I think that's just where we started out on that. And then here's one for Jacob. This is from Kevin. So if everyone had one of those signs in their front door window saying this home is protected by a gun, would that reduce crime, right?
Well, arguably, I would say that if I was a thief or a robber, which I would never aspire to be, of course, if I saw that sign in the door, if I kind of knew somebody was in a more aggressive gun owner, say if I knew the person living in that house was an ex-Marine that knew how to shoot and had a few guns in his house, I would be much less inclined to rob him than say somebody that maybe, you know, is a little bit more careless with like locking their door and doesn't have a gun. You know, I'd be very particular with who I would choose. So yes, I would argue that that'd be a deterrent for me if I was a thief. Now, getting back to Spiro's question there about the homicide rate, that's true. Why does the homicide rate always come down to legal guns? Because remember, I said there's a clear distinction earlier on about people that obtain guns legally and illegally. Being near the city of Chicago as I am, I know a lot about the history of the mob and a lot of the other organized crime elements in the city of Chicago. And 9 times out of 10, these organized crime elements or gangs that do most of the shootings many times shoot with automatic weapons that are already illegal in all states. I mean, you see semi-automatic weapons are accessible in many places, but not automatic ones. I would also argue, getting back to one of Ashton's earlier arguments about not everything in the Constitution is necessarily good, and comparing the Second Amendment to where slavery was in the Constitution, I think that's kind of a radical position. I don't even think most people that are Democrats, like I know a lot of gun rights Democrats that would never, ever think of repealing the Second Amendment and ever even comparing it to slavery or other previous, aspects of our laws that were unjustified. Because I always argue that the Second Amendment is really what protects the First. Getting back to the idea of having a armed citizenry to not promote insurrection. I'm not here to say we need an insurrection or civil war. God forbid. That's something we don't need. But in case like a radical authorities did take over, you got to have a deterrent to protect your constitutional rights, and that was the clear intent of the founders in putting in the Second Amendment. If you want to reinterpret it, then you got to repeal the Second Amendment and put in a whole different amendment, which I do not think the majority of the American populace would be on board with.
Yeah, so I guess if you had a sign, this home protected by a gun, what do you think about, I'm going to throw this one to Ashton, about a gun-free zone? I mean, I've heard this argument like, well, if they know there's not a gun there, somebody can come shoot it up. So
that's just, so the argument that we're using guns to protect ourselves in our homes, that's not what data shows. That's not what it shows. It shows that if you have a gun in your home, you are twice as likely to use it on yourself or someone in your home as you are to use it on an intruder. And if you have a gun in your home, you're six times more likely to die from a gunshot wound than people who don't have guns in their home. So we do see that having guns in our home, even if we are a trained gun owner, does have an element of danger. And I am seeing some people say, I was pretty shocked when I researched this. I thoroughly researched before I presented any data on here. But the information that I'm getting about Indiana's gun laws comes from Giffords Law Center. So that Indiana is the 20th worst state for gun violence. We don't require universal background checks, and you don't have to register a handgun, rifle, or shotgun. And that is from Giffords Law Center, which is a data-backed source. So that is where I've gotten my information for those saying that that is not true. If I am incorrect and you can find that source elsewhere, I'd love to see it. But the fact remains that if you have a gun-free zone and you have places outside of it that have lax gun laws, it's going to bleed in. Mexico has stricter gun laws than we do, and they actually have a huge amount of crime committed in Mexico from guns that are trafficked from the United States. We don't have organized crime here the same way that Mexico does with the cartel. It's the same intensity, but we are hurting other people around us. We're hurting other states. by not matching that level. And I am not saying, Jacob, take away guns. I also am not saying that the Second Amendment is comparable to slavery. I'm just using that as the point that you can amend the Constitution. We've done it in the past. So the issue remains that we have to do something, and we have to look at other countries, and we have to look at other places that have implemented this with success and try and implement some sort of common sense gun laws. We see that changing who has access to firearms is more effective than what firearms people have access to. So mandatory background checks, I think, are so important. Waiting periods when you can buy a gun, so important. And mandatory registering of all firearms.
Yep. Okay. So we're gonna. I got another question for you to get on here. We're gonna do one more question, and I love that there's folks actually commenting, and we're gonna get to these. Here's one for Michael Hart, and this is for pretty much both of you. Will criminals follow the laws that were proposed for law-abiding citizens? Otherwise, if we have a gun law that says you can't have a gun, I've heard it said that only outlaws will have guns. So I'm not. I'm going to play the middle on this. I'm mixed on that in a couple ways. I think I remember growing up as a kid that you weren't allowed to shoot a gun in Marion County. I don't know if that was just our parents telling us so we wouldn't shoot in our backyard or whatever. But what do you think about those couple of items? Start with Jacob, and then Ashton, you get your take on that.
Well, this really ties back into my point that I made earlier. The fact of the matter is that criminals do not follow the laws designed for law-abiding citizens. I mean, you can go back to the 1920s with Al Capone in Chicago. You had him buying Tommy guns for his people, and Tommy guns they were automatic weapons. They were not legal for citizen use, but yet the fact remains they still got them anyway. So the thing about these laws is, first of all, Ashton's data, I can understand where she pulls it up, but I would be very interested to dive deeper into that data and see in those states that have higher gun violence, in what areas is that gun violence higher? Like, say, Indiana has a high rate of gun violence. Is it in like conservative Warsaw, Indiana, or is it in Gary or in Indianapolis, in blue cities that are known to have high crime rates? Maybe we'll find our answer there. I'm not sure. But the other thing is too is
Jacob, I'm going to pause you real quick to clarify what you just said. I want to make sure that this is not what you're saying. You're not implying that Democrats are not law-abiding citizens, correct?
No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that generally the rate of gun violence seems to be higher in Democrat-run cities like Chicago, like Gary, Indiana, like Indianapolis, like Detroit, those areas. So no, I'm not saying like, of course, the average Democrat voter or politician is not a criminal, but I think that their policies do allow criminals to have a little bit more leeway while, hurting the average gun owner. I would also argue that a lot of these gun laws that Ashton was proposing and that a lot of people on the left have proposed, are they really constitutional or not? Because from my reading of the Constitution, it says that the government shall not infringe upon our rights to bear arms. I could pull up my pocket Constitution right now, but basically the context of the Second Amendment is around that sentiment. So are these laws like background checks or mandatory buybacks, not only are they effective against crime, but are they even legal? That would be very interesting. And yes, if you want to have those things, maybe you could rewrite the Constitution. But from my understanding, the government doesn't have a right to infringe on our rights to keep and bear arms. So it'd be very interesting to see, perhaps through the legal system, whether these laws are even constitutional to begin with. Nonetheless, even effective against violent crime, which I believe they're not.
Okay, Ashton, what do you say?
Well, again, I would argue that the amendments are meant to be amended. But the other point of that is, as you know, with a degree in psychology, my favorite thing to say is correlation does not equal causation. We see larger rates of gun violence in more highly populated areas. Highly populated areas tend to be more resided in by Democrats, and typically tend to be because people with higher education tend to vote liberal. I'm not saying conservatives are not educated, but a lot of more educated individuals tend to flock to cities for work. So that is not, there is a third variable problem here. So to try and say that it is because cities are run by liberals, they have higher amounts of gun violence, that's not accurate. That would be because there's more people in the city, they have higher rates of gun violence. You're more likely to punch someone in the face if there's someone next to you 24/7 than if the closest person is 3 miles away. So, that's really not even something that we can try and say is the causing factor on that. But again, other countries have shown this. America likes to think ourselves the exception when we are not the exception to the rule. A lot of people that have, a lot of other countries that have implemented gun laws, they see this decrease. The most concerning thing to me is America has 4 times a higher rate of gun violence than Syria, which is just insane because that is a war-torn nation. We're obviously doing something wrong, and I'm not understanding why we can't fix it. We have school shootings, kids afraid to go to school. It's just something that we really need to look at and try and address for the betterment of our nation and our country, and that's what America is about, is making things better.
And that is a good segue to maybe let's talk about the culture. Let's get off the guns. Let's talk about the cultural issues. And one of the things I've noticed here in Indianapolis is retaliation shooting. There'll be so-and-so shot my family, so-and-so shot mine. Here in Mars Hill, we haven't had any incidents in a while, but our last murder was a drug-related murder. It was, 2 people were shot and killed because they owed so-and-so and whatever the reason was, but it was drug-related. What do you think culturally we can do? I know Jacob touched early on that about education, and we here in Mars Hill try to provide activities. My rule when I was campaigning that I like to say is every neighborhood needs at least 3 activities. In Mars Hill, there really wasn't much to do. We started the art center. There's a community center, but it's just really, kids say, "Oh, there's nothing to do." Well, then they get in trouble. So let's start with Jacob on this one. And like I said, you already touched on it a little bit, but what do you think about the culture and that type of thing and the sociology of this?
Well, you could best summarize my viewpoint really in one sentence, and that'd be a quote from St. Jerome: "Idle hands are the devil's workshop." And what does that mean when we really drill down to it? Well, when people don't have anything better to do, they get themselves into trouble. Hey, we were all teenagers at one time, right? Whether we were doing, really bad things or just, minor little mischievous things, teenagers like to get into trouble. And a lot of times you see a lot of this gun violence, carjackings, all that kind of stuff. It comes from young men in high school or maybe college aged even that don't have anything better to do. So I think this kind of results from a lot of problems. First of all, in a lot of these inner city areas, you have a breakdown of the family unit. So a lot of times these young men do not have father figures they can look up to that are watching them. The mothers, as wonderful as they are for having kids and trying to take care of them, a lot of times they're trying to support the kids on their own. And that can be very difficult to go to work and watch the kids 24/7. And then also you have the educational system in a lot of these inner cities is really just broken down. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, I know in Indianapolis, they've had, it's just like any other urban city where you have some schools are better than others. You have up in Gary, Indiana, for example, some of those public schools aren't even functional at all. And so one of the solutions you've had charter schools come into places like Gary and other inner city areas to try and rectify this problem. But immediately the teachers unions get a hold of that and they drive them out of there. So, I think if you had a better school system, I think if you had more of an emphasis on encouraging people not to have children out of wedlock, if you had more leisurely activities like you were mentioning, John, something productive for these kids to do at their time, if you go play soccer, baseball, whatever, something like that, or go to like a church youth group, I think that would be I think those would be things that would really see these bored youth not bored anymore and going out and causing mischief and doing something productive with their time that not only keeps them off the streets, but helps them be better people, because you have them in school, you have them in church, you have them in the basketball court, that is giving them good skills that will make them better people in the long run.
Yeah. And case in point, we've just had a six people murdered a family by one of the kids that was 17 years old. And that, that is right in that area of, old enough to know better, but what's going on there? Ashton, could you talk to maybe about some of the psychology on this, or what point would you like to make as far as what the cultural, barrier is or deterrent? How could we change this culture, I guess?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to look at our cities. We have to look at places that typically don't have the same opportunities as others. I live in Carmel. I am very privileged and have been very privileged to live here. And when we look at the taxes that come from a Carmel resident and go towards our school, we have excellent schools, excellent programs. But when you have a lower income neighborhood, those kids aren't having the same opportunities. Now, is that right? Is that okay? I don't think so. Because what you end up having is, like Jacob said, idle hands are the devil's playground. So you have to get these kids involved in extracurriculars, give them something to look forward to, give them a future to think of. And that's another thing is we have to talk about free education. I know I sound like, your typical liberal, but when you have kids that are thinking,
and you guys are agreeing too. That's okay. It's our first agreement.
When you have kids that are, yeah, there we go, a middle ground. When we have kids that are graduating high school and they don't think that they have a future because they can't afford to go to college, that's a problem, because when you look at today's world, you have to have a college degree to get paid $15 an hour. So we really need to look at that and those opportunities that we are extending to these students and these kids. We also have to talk about how the drug problem in Indiana and what would happen if we did legalize marijuana, because a lot of times people get tied up in bad situations with drug dealers that are, they go there for weed originally, which is not that terrible of a drug. I mean, I've never heard anybody kill someone when they were high, but they go to these drug dealers and they offer them heroin, and then they get hooked on other drugs. So in that way, us not legalizing marijuana exacerbates the drug problem because people are getting hooked up with drug dealers that are giving them worse things. And that's something that we need to look at. How do we help prevent that? Maybe decriminalize drugs. I'd want to look into that more and how effective that's been in other states before I spoke on it. But that is something that we definitely need to look at, especially in Indianapolis.
And speaking of education, here's a question from Penny. What is the effect of more education on gun violence? Does anybody know that? I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it would probably help. But I don't know if there's any study or any type of thing that shows that if there's more education on gun violence, that would be. But it does seem like our culture solves its differences with lead instead of words. And I think that's one of the biggest things. So we're going to wrap this topic up and go to our national topic now. And I do appreciate all the questions. We didn't quite get to all of them, but there is definitely some interest in this. And I think that you guys did a great job. And I just want to say, I know when I was in my 20s, I could not really carry on a sentence in public. So it took me quite a few years. But in all fairness, you have grown up in front of a camera a lot more than we did as kids. So you're doing a great job. And let's see here. Let's go to the next topic. And that is going to be the Black Lives Matter Nobel Peace Prize nomination. And we decided we were going to talk about that. And just because, I don't know, why did we decide? Because it was sort of not being beat to death in the news media. And it's definitely, I guess, a hot topic. So I'm going to start with Ashton this time, and give me your take on what you think about this, and maybe you could explain exactly what this is, because I know when we talked about it the other day, I really didn't know. So you enlightened me on what is exactly going on with the Nobel Peace Laureate. So go ahead.
So Black Lives Matter was actually nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And I have been trying to figure this out, and have been unable to. The wording is a little bit confusing to me. It's a lot of the wording that I'm seeing is it's the movement is nominated, but the movement and the organization are different. So that I am a little bit unclear on who exactly is nominated, whether it's Black Lives Matter, the organization, or just the general movement, Black Lives Matter. But they were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. It's not an official nomination. They haven't been chosen as one of the finalists. That won't happen until March. But that has happened, and whether or not, we think that they deserve the nomination, I think is just what we were going to talk about.
Okay, Jacob, I mean, this is something that I hear a lot of people on the right saying, oh, he's looting, burning down our cities and all that. They don't deserve nothing. So does that sound pretty accurate to some of the folks that are anti-Black Lives Matter?
Well, I'll be honest. As soon as I got this article from a friend the other day, texted me over Facebook Messenger, and as soon as I saw this, I literally thought it was satire. I thought it was from the Babylon Bee, that they'd be giving the Nobel Peace Prize to Black Lives Matter. And then when I find out that it was to the movement instead of the organization, that makes things even more absurd, because a movement is such a vague concept. At least with an organization, you can specifically pin down who the prize is going to. But with the movement, who are you giving it to in the movement? Because supposedly I've heard some BLM activists say that they disavow the violence. I mean, I haven't heard that many of them, to be honest. But then there's plenty of them out there just outright pushing violence and Marxist propaganda. So who is the award going to then? Is it going to the ones that condemn the violence? Or is it going to the burning and looting Marxists that we've seen all over our television screens from the month of June onwards? Which ones is it going to? So, I mean,
okay. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I actually interviewed Indy 10 Black Lives Matter shortly after the riots this summer here in Indianapolis. And I have a clip from that show. And if you're asking about Black Lives Matter, were they the rioters in Indianapolis? Well, I think this will probably give you a little insight on that. So we're going to roll this clip, and we'll be back in about a minute. And so now let's jump forward to the basically the riots a little bit over a week ago, and how you guys fit in that, because what I've noticed is there's several different groups, and you don't want to be involved with some of those people, and because you don't want your message to be overshadowed.
Right.
So tell me how you were able to get your folks, to understand that.
Well, pretty much the people that come out for Indy 10, we got a different coalition of groups that we all come together and we show up. Now, the riots weren't started by Indy 10 or anybody in our coalition, but those are what got the mayor's attention. So I can't say that we condemn the people that started the riots, but we did not start them. And those people, they are now with us now, but they understand that right now we want to hear the quiet after the storm. We want to hear what they have to say after the riots.
Okay, so there you go. That if you were, in favor of the Black Lives Matter movement, is from that perspective, it's hard to refute that from Erica there, who is one of the leaders of Indy 10. But as I said in that, is there's many factions, many different areas, many different things. So Jacob, be the devil's advocate here on this. What say you?
Well, if you listen really close to Erica, I would argue that I could refute it quite simply. I mean, she said that, yes, we didn't start the riots necessarily, our Indy 10 BLM organization, but she also says that they didn't condemn them. That was part of her words there, because she says that it, quote unquote, got the mayor's attention the most. So that's the main issue I have with this organization. They could sit there and say, we didn't start riots all day, But unless they come out and strongly condemn the violence and the looting, it's just going to continue because you've seen it one after another. Now in Indianapolis, the riots weren't as bad as say up in Chicago, but up in Chicago, we've had it multiple times. It wasn't just one riot. It was like, it became like a weekly thing. It was like, oh, you know, you got the Cubs and the Sox game, then you got the weekly riot. So, you know, that's the thing is this organization, if they're even, I don't think they're anywhere close to deserving a Nobel Prize, but if they're even worthy of just being taken seriously by the American public, they need to come out and condemn the violence and condemn the looting and not give us half-hearted rebuttals like we saw from the young lady in the video.
Well, I want to make sure that we are clear that 93% of Black Lives Matter demonstration were not violent. It was 7%. There were a lot across the country, and a minority resulted in any kind of violence. And to try and act like the violence is not justified, Martin Luther King himself said a riot is the language of the unheard. People were frustrated and they weren't sure what else to do. And I'd like you to show me any sort of movement in history that was achieved through completely 100% peaceful means. I'm not by any means saying that we should be going out and burning buildings down, but I'm saying that this is what happens when people are oppressed and people are treated unfairly. And the way that Martin Luther King is painted in history today is completely whitewashed to make people more comfortable. Martin Luther King was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize, and he himself said that there was a time that you might have to start violence for there to be changes. Malcolm X actually condemned Martin Luther King because he did a march with children where he had children on the front lines marching to one of the most racist police departments in the entire country because they knew that the United States public could not ignore police beating children. And it couldn't. It could ignore police beating Black women and men, and it couldn't ignore them beating children. So that is when we really saw a turn. Malcolm X condemned this and said real men don't put children on the front lines. But Martin Luther King Jr. said that this was probably one of the best things that they did in this movement. So even Martin Luther King Jr. understood that this happens in movements like this. When there was a fight for gay rights because of homophobic policies, that was violent. I mean, the Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party, that when we look back on these things, we're going to say that they were justified and even valiant in the future. And right now, I understand that might not be how a lot of people feel, but it's just what has happened because of the civil unrest. The treatment of people of color in our country has been abhorrent, and they haven't been heard, and this is how it showed itself.
Yep. And, in fairness for the Indianapolis was a little bit separate because about 34 days before I did the interview with Erica and Indy 10, we had Drejon Reed, who was, for those to catch you up on, he did a Facebook Live, like 20 or 30-minute police chase, which ended in hails of bullets and him being shot, his face shot off, basically. And the mayor really just ignored anything. And in that one, I went down to the protest. I like to have boots on the ground and see for myself what's going on. And I was right up in front where the speakers were, and it was right in front of the city county building. And all the mayor or somebody just had to come down and talk to that crowd, and they would have felt at least like they'd been listened to. And from that was where they went out to 62nd Street and started blocking the intersections. And then you fast forward 3 or so weeks later, we have the George Floyd thing, and it just, light the match and let it go. So I can see both sides of this, because that's why I'm in the middle. I get the luxury of saying I see both sides. You have to get their attention. You got to get noticed. But at the same time, do you have to burn down my business? So, and it really, in Indianapolis, it's just been, we still have boards up, and it's been very, very crushing in that regard. Okay, so let's see if we're
John, could I get a quick point in real quick?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, with the riots, I mean, even you can throw all the quotes at me all day, you know, whether it was Martin Luther King or whether it was Martin Luther that said, you know, that rioting can be justified. I still think that in a political movement, riots are not justified. And I would say that really the Boston Tea Party and the BLM riots are two completely different things. That was more of a revolution against a particular government, not going and burning down Harry's barber shop down the street. I mean, these businesses have been struggling this whole year because of the COVID shutdowns, which I also, you know, highly disagree with, these lockdowns. And then on top of that, you're going to go and burn their businesses down. I mean, I was up in Indianapolis and I was up in Chicago, and the amount of buildings that I saw that were either boarded up or destroyed, especially small businesses that'll have a harder time recovering than corporations, is just abhorrent. If you want to get attention for your movement, peaceful protest, organization, that's the way to do it. That's how I do it in my movement, because I run various conservative groups, and that's how we do it. We haven't burned one building, haven't hurt one person. Just peaceful protests, writing your legislatures, and organizing.
I would just, historically though, Jacob, that is just not true. It's just not. Historically, you see movements have the momentum when things like this happen. Gay and transgender Americans fought police and rioted in New York and San Francisco to overthrow homophobic policies. The change happened after that. Labor riots, violent labor riots, they helped end unsafe work conditions. And slavery in the United States ended only after one of the deadliest wars in the nation's history. I mean, we're seeing that there's a trend here when there are rights at stake. These are people's lives and freedom at stake. And that is not something that you can just come and peacefully ask for. It's been tried. They've tried to ask for it.
But burning down a barber shop or a grocery store or something, that somehow gets attention. If anything, in my opinion, I think a lot of people have been turned off more by BLM because of these riots. I mean, I've heard, when I was working on the campaign trail for a couple candidates that I supported, people would ask me is, what are they going to do about the riots? What are they going to do about the riots? I think this has really hurt their movement. And I just don't think it's ever justifiable to go and, you know, attack a small business. The Civil War, the Revolutionary War, that's one thing, because you're fighting, you know, a different government, a different political ideology. But just getting the small mom and pop businessman torched in the middle of this, that's just not acceptable. And I think the only way for BLM and for left wingers to have legitimacy on this is they need to come out right now and condemn the BLM violence and say, yes, this happens. We understand that, but we do not support it, and we clearly condemn.
People don't take joy in the violence. They don't find it to be a good thing. No one is excited about violence and burning of these buildings. That's not what anybody is saying. If we could have equality, if we could have equity in this country without that, that would be an ideal situation. But what we've seen historically and what we're seeing now is people are not listened to until you make them listen to you. And that's been the same for hundreds of years. I mean, I know you said don't throw quotes at me, but Martin Luther King Jr. said freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And that is what Black Lives Matter is doing. They are demanding equity. And we see the Nobel Peace Prize has a history for rewarding that. They did it with Nelson Mandela. They did it with Martin Luther King Jr., and they did it with Albert Luthuli. So we've seen that the Nobel Peace Prize takes the stance that we can't have peace until we have equity. And that's why I think Black Lives Matter does deserve this nomination.
Well, but equity in what sense? Because the thing is, you have different African Americans of very distinguished backgrounds, none the least like Dr. Ben Carson, Thomas Sowell, Candace Owens, Justice Clarence Thomas. I would assume that the four of them would not be so supportive of BLM and their methods. And I would really argue that things have gotten much better for African Americans, and largely it's been the result of Republican and conservative policies. I mean, you look at like the segregation of states in the South, they were mostly run by Democrats. The people that came in and pushed for their repeal, yes, Democrats did as well, but Republicans spearheaded that. I recall Richard Nixon being at the forefront of that in the 50s. So I don't even quite see what the BLM movement's trying to accomplish. I mean, we've gotten rid of a lot of the laws that were unjustly targeted towards Black people, and we even have Black people on the right that are very prolific that I follow myself. So the goals of the organization are very vague as well.
weaponizing a minority of Black voices is something that I know bothers a lot of my friends. Candace Owens is in a minority of Black individuals. And the thing is, first of all, since the Civil War, the party switched platforms. So saying that the Democrats were interested in slavery, yeah, at the time, but the party switched platforms. So that's not accurate. But the problem is the institutions in the United States were built on racism. So we have to look at those institutions and those systems and change them. We see a huge police brutality issue that disproportionately targets Black and brown people. We see that. We have data to back that up. So how do we change that? And when we talk about, defund the police, I think that the hashtag defund the police was not a great hashtag, because really it should have been hashtag reallocate funds. In the police department, our police are not trained to deal with a lot of the things that they are expected to deal with. They are not given enough training to handle mental health crisis. They aren't given enough implicit bias training. They don't have the policies in place that are meant to inhibit things like this from happening. We met with the Carmel Police Department and helped make some changes there where they made their stuff more public. We need more transparent police departments. And that is what we are fighting for, is for these changes to be made to change the system that we live in to make it more equitable.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there because we're getting close to the end of the show, and we still have Chew on This, the conspiracy theory going. And that was a great discussion. You both supported your positions very well. In fact, the chat, people were even impressed with that. They were impressed with you guys are acting like 29-year-olds. You're so bright, I'm telling you. So, so let's get ready. I'm gonna go ahead and play this little intro to our next segment. We're gonna have a little fun with this. So go ahead and watch this. Hey y'all, it's time for the conspiracy theory. So you better get your tinfoil hat out and let's see what's going on this week. Oh yeah, okay. My conspiracy theory hat's coming off already. What's up with that? It's going to need a little help on this. So we're going to call this segment, this is our conspiracy theory. We've each come up with this conspiracy that we're going to talk about and do something here with this. And I'll go ahead and start on mine. No, Ashton, you go ahead. Ladies first. You go ahead and start with yours. And
I am a tinfoil queen, so
yes.
All right, so are you ready for the craziest? My mom actually sent this to me. All right. Trump did not go to Florida. I repeat, Trump did not go to Florida. He has been staying in a luxurious underground bunker in the White House with top generals, and they are planning any moment now, whether it be an hour or in a few days, to storm the White House with 120,000 troops and publicly arrest Biden. Trump has been keeping the big voter fraud evidence for this very moment, and it will change global politics forever. And the military will ensure he will be inaugurated for 4 more years. I cannot tell you my sources. Just trust me. I could be killed for even sharing this. Just hold tight, Patriots. It's only the beginning.
Okay, that's a good one. Well, that's sort of a good segue to mine. And I actually have a picture with mine, but I've been told, this is by a unanimous source or anonymous or whatever you call them, that there is that President Biden is in a fake White House because he's not allowed, because Trump is still staying in the basement of the White House and he can't get there. And I actually have a picture for proof. Here you go. So that is the actual set where Joe Biden is actually doing his executive orders and all that other stuff. So, I mean, you can take that one to the bank right there. I mean, I got a picture and everything, and it's on the internet, so it must be true. All right, Jacob, what do you got for us?
Well, and I can fill in the whole piece of the whole puzzle for you guys, just one little piece. Ashton was saying that Trump's hiding out in the bunker and he's going to be coming back and Biden's not going to be president. Well, the date is going to be March 4th because apparently before Herbert Hoover was president, or I think actually before FDR was president, right after Hoover, presidents were inaugurated in early March, not in January. And that changed during the FDR administration. So Trump will be coming back on the original day, and then he will be restored as the 19th president of the United States, the country, not the corporation.
Wow. So I like how we talk. It's almost like we rehearsed those. I think that was probably, we did the best homework we did on that. And I get a C- for my tinfoil hat. I think
I'm kind of in love with my crown.
Yours is, it looks really, both of them. I mean, it's awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, the hour has gone by quickly, and I'm just very impressed with how well you've done with this. And we've had quite a few people in chat that are impressed with your knowledge of the topics. And so I would say that next week we'll be ready to go. So anybody that's watching, you can actually call the number. Let me see. I'm going to put that up again. You can call the number right here, and you can leave a voicemail. And we have the capability of actually playing that voicemail. If it's something that works for the show, we'll play it on the air. If you have questions, you can leave that question there as well. And then also, if you missed this show, or if you want to watch it later, we're going to have this on Rumble and YouTube. We'll archive our shows there, so you don't have to hunt through the Facebook page to find these live shows. So I thank you for tuning in to the very first Mouthwash show, a minty fresh take on politics. And as you can see, we have two very, very good experts that are on this show, for the left and for the right, or the other way around. It's been a pleasure. And we will also be adding experts guests. So if you are an expert on a topic and you'd like to, throw it out there, let us know, and we'll see about getting a spot for you to come on here. And maybe you can even make your own tinfoil hat, come up with your own conspiracy. So thanks for tuning in, and join us next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and peace out.